In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at some major cold air that we are already really feeling here in the eastern states. I think we put it perfectly about a week or two ago when we discussed how the first would feel a lot colder than the 31st of December. The second would be a bit colder than the first, and the third would be a little bit cooler than the second was. And we can kind of feel that descent happening outside. So I think it's really cool how that is panned out. And we're going to expect to keep heading down into that descent into the colder temperatures as we keep going on into the early point of January here. We also have multiple opportunities for major snowstorms, one of which is happening this weekend into the very early portion of next week. So mostly Sunday, Monday. For a lot of our Ohio Valley and East Coast people, some of the plains feeling that by Saturday night. We're going to be discussing that storm. Among another storm that'll come more from the south, this one is a little bit more debatable as it's further out, more like next weekend, so 6 to 7 days out at least. We're going to be going over that one and then other opportunities for snowfall along the entire upcoming pattern. So let's go ahead and dive into things. We're taking a look here at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, which has been updated from the Climate Prediction Center. Still expecting very deep cold, especially for the southeastern corner here of the nation. But really, when we look at where the main potential for cold air is, it's going to be over most of the eastern states here, where we have warmer air really settling in over the west, but not only that, some of the north central states here. And this will still be a positive PNA. We do see this shooting all the way up to Alaska even, which shows us how high up that warm air is traveling up the west coast. I've said it before for sure, but this causes the cold air to dive further south in the east. So we see the opposite effect happening from the west coast to the east coast. So again, the higher up this warmth goes, the west, the lower down this cold goes in the east. And we've seen that effect in full effect here. And this is for the 9th through the 13th, by the way. Here is the precipitation during that time frame. We can see that it's so cold that a lot of our storms are going to be forced to move around this cold air mass. So we're really going to dry up for a lot of these areas over the 9th through 13th time frame. When we look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, which will be for the 11th through the 17th, we can see them kind of backing away from some of the colder temperatures. And you might be thinking, are they losing confidence in what we've been calling for? The answer is no. We've just gone ahead and pushed this forecast range to really beyond where we've been expecting the cold air. So again, we've said the whole time, kind of like the 8th through the 12th time frame, maybe 7th through 12th is kind of that coldest period. Whereas like the 1st through the 6th, 7th time frame is expected to be quite cold. That again, 7th through 12th is the coldest, and that's only the first two out of really 6 days that we have in this forecast period. So we can see that they're losing confidence on the back end because it's really a question mark after like the 14th, 15th, 16th time frame, and that's the majority of this forecast period. Still leaning cold for the east though during this entire period, which is interesting. And more interesting things coming up in a minute. They have updated the 3 to 4 week outlook, which I'm very excited to show you guys. I'm a little actually surprised by it, so we'll take a look at that in a moment. But really, when we look at the precipitation, it's a lot of the same. So we're going to just glance at it here and move past. But the 3 to 4 week outlook here looks a lot different. This is for the 18th through the 31st. So really, your final half of January is how you can look at this. And as of right now, the Climate Prediction Center is showing cold moving through the northern plains down into the eastern states, with this positive PNA really staying in full swing here out west. And I'm a little bit surprised by this because it's such a question mark after the 15th. I thought that they would for sure come out with a very conservative outlook for that final half of January, but no, they feel pretty confident in the cold continuing for this final half of January. And you know they're very conservative with these outlooks, so to see this is very good news if you're hoping for cold and snowfall chances to continue. You might be wondering, hey, is it still going to be dry though? Because if it's cold and it's dry, it really just leads to cold, not too much snowfall. And boy, do I have something to show you guys. Alongside this, we also have an updated precipitation forecast for the 3 to 4 week outlook. And here it is. This looks a lot more favorable than the pattern that we are currently in and going to be in through about the 12th, 13th. If we can get the cold throughout these areas, and then also an active storm track along the eastern states, this might be the sweet spot, the perfect time frame during this pattern to experience even more snowfall. Again, we do have storms tracking through. It's just not a kind of huge amount of storms the entire cold period like you would perhaps expect. But this looks much more in the way of a very active snowstorm pattern, especially in these areas in kind of like the southern New England, mid-Atlantic region, where we also have, we'll show you, but the coldest temperatures expected. So coldest and highest precipitation, good combo there if you're hoping for cold and snow. And really this goes for most of these areas. I mean, when we look at the above average precipitation, below average temperatures, really, really good look there. Now, the monthly outlook obviously stays the same, and I can't help but notice the resemblance here. This is their January outlook as a whole. And then here is that 3 to 4 week outlook, and that is a pretty similar map. So it's clear that this is their thoughts overall for January, including the second half. A little warmer for northern New England, and thankfully these areas, even in above average temperature patterns, are still plenty cold a lot of the time for snowfall. So it won't matter for you guys as much as it will for these more middle regions of the eastern United States. The west looking very, very warm though. Positive P&A looks to prevail throughout the month according to them. Precipitation here, while it's not as good as that 3 to 4 week outlook because we do have the drier portion here for the beginning half of the month, it is still rather neutral. And when you have the below normal temperatures with average to above average precipitation, this could lead to big things. Same story goes for the Great Lakes, Midwest, Plains, Ohio Valley, kind of looking decent, especially when we consider the cold, which we haven't had in years, by the way. So this is already shaping up to be, I think we can already kind of confirm after the, first month of meteorological winter that this will basically go down as the coldest winter we've had in a few years, without a doubt. Even if the rest of the winter is a complete blowtorch, the previous like 3 have been a blowtorch from December 1st straight through March. So to have a cold period in there has already put us in the category of probably the coldest winter we've had. But the cold doesn't seem to be going away very soon. So pretty good news for cold and snow lovers. Let's move into the model guidance though. I want to show you some things. There hasn't been too much change regarding our first storm. We have seen a little bit of a southern trend over the last 24 hours or so. So we see this low originating near kind of like the Texas Panhandle here. That's very late on Saturday, about 10 p.m. As we keep going towards Sunday afternoon, this will be about 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon, we see this low is near Arkansas. So we've seen a southern trend. It's not moving straight through the plains and Midwest. It's honestly going to move somewhere in here. And a lot of areas in the more southern regions here do have a higher chance of snowfall now. So we see a lot of ice in the middle there. So be on the lookout for that. Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, Kentucky, eastern Tennessee. We're really going to be watching that closely. Snowfall for Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, portions of Kentucky there. It's going to be a wintry mix, unfortunately, which leads to really, really hard to predict forecasts. This low being near western Tennessee. Some snowfall even reaching to my neck of the woods in Virginia. Probably going to vlog that if there's flakes at all. I haven't even seen flakes in 2 winters, so I average about, 6-7 inches of snowfall a year. And we've seen no accumulation in over 1,000 days here where I live. And in addition to that, again, 2 years since I've even seen snowflakes falling out of the sky. So some of you have done a lot better than that and are still complaining. So put it into perspective. Some of us have done a lot worse than others. With all that being said, I would be very excited to see even just flakes. We do see that this storm is, again, a little further south. While the low pressure is rather broad throughout these areas, we do switch over to rainfall for some of these regions. If we see a southern trend continue, the rain-snow line could drop even further. Vice versa, if we see a northern trend ensue, we could see that rain-snow line push even further north, so keep that in mind. But right now, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey seems to be that kind of sweet spot and really bullseye for this initial snowstorm that we're tracking here just a couple of days away. As we reach the overnight hour, we do see some back-end snowfall for some of these areas. Again, my neck of the woods. If I saw accumulation, I would probably jump up and down. This looks to be possible with this, maybe 1 or 2 inches for me. We can all keep our fingers crossed, right? Direct weather wants some snow. It's been a long time. And we do see, again, Virginia, DC, Maryland, Delmarva here, seeing a moderate amount of snowfall there on the back end. That could bring accumulation even to areas that saw rainfall prior. We see that one come to an end. It gives way to a colder pattern again, even probably the coldest as we're reaching the 8th. Again, 8th through 12th is kind of that time to watch. 9th here, that cold is getting deeper. We do have a storm kind of starting out here near Texas, Mexico area. We do see some snowfall there for Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma in the deeper south areas here. As time goes on, though, this storm looks a little bit more north-based, just like we saw in the models yesterday. And I think what's basically aided in this storm trending northward is the cold, the jet stream trending northward as well. We still expect very deep cold for these areas, but this jet stream and the cold has kind of backed off of these areas a little bit, and this has allowed for the storm to kind of elevate up just a tad bit to where we could get a snow system once again in these areas. It's a little less horizontal. It has some more kind of climbing to it as it reaches towards the east, but it looks really decent at this point. Here is Saturday at about 1 a.m. Some snowfall for Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia here. Same thing by the time we're reaching about 7 a.m. Saturday, January 11th here. Some wintry mix over North Carolina and southeastern Virginia with heavy snowfall really for Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, D.C. Similar areas that saw that initial snowstorm. As that low moves by, we again get some back-end snowfall before that one's said and done. This gives way to a brief warm-up, whereas we see the cold move right back in for the 13th, 14th here. That lasts through the 15th, 16th. Maybe another kind of clipper pattern that we reach into where we get some light to moderate snow events moving down from Canada into the Midwest, Ohio Valley and Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic perhaps. That seems to be what we're seeing kind of pop up on the models here. And as we reach towards the 17th, 18th, we do warm up for a brief moment and even get another major snowstorm here. Take it with a grain of salt as it is 366 hours out, but we get a very favorable jet stream for a storm like this, where a storm can ride right along that jet stream as we see 993 right in there. Heavy snowfall along the Appalachian Mountain Range. Could be a favorable pattern for that, like I said, although it's very, very far out, and we do reach another pretty brutal cool down. If we were to see a storm move along the jet stream at this point, it would be just offshore, and it would be a little bit more juicier for some of these coastal areas especially. So a lot of possibilities. If we do see a colder pattern, a strong jet stream that's just off coast, and we see a frequent storm pattern, which is really what we've seen from the Climate Prediction Center early on. Again, colder, more frequent storm track, and now models even suggesting a favorable jet stream could spell more things to track here after these storms are even said and done, which is a very exciting prospect. Let's move on to our European model. A couple of differences. You're not going to find too many with this initial storm, as this is also southern based like we saw in the GFS model. It's trended southward. Heaviest snowfall likely between Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., southern Pennsylvania, Delaware, southern New Jersey there. We do get that back-end snowfall for a lot of Virginia and northern North Carolina as well. Gives way to a colder pattern, so very similar to the GFS model, except we really don't see the jet stream pull this storm into the east at all. What we'll see is that it kind of just stays stagnant down here, still bringing some deeper south snowfall to the south central, but it's not getting that pull into the east until it does. So what we see is Friday, Saturday, it doesn't want to move in, but a lot later than the GFS model shows, we do actually get a pretty similar storm moving through the deep south into the Carolinas, bringing some mid-Atlantic snowfall. A little less amped than what we saw in the GFS, but kind of similar. I want to move back. I want to kind of compare here to the second storm. Let's place this here. And when we look, I mean, that is not too far off. The only thing that's off is the timing. This is 2 days later. So GFS, and then 2 days later on the European model. Very similar jet stream. Well, kind of. Similar storm track, at least. Similar storm, similar impacts. So interesting to see these storms kind of flirting with a weekend or early next week snowstorm. That is the week after next, better yet. So around, the 10th through 13th time frame, we're watching this storm signal on both models now, and we're drawing closer. So definitely something to track. We see that air get colder before it gets warmer. So Tuesday the 14th, Wednesday the 15th, Thursday the 16th, Friday the 17th, and then we warm up briefly here, but you can tell it looks like some more cold air is about to invade. Especially we have that oh-so-famous Hudson Bay, Great Lakes low here that we've been tracking throughout the fall and winter. These lows that move straight through this area tend to bring these really strengthening cold fronts through that really switch up the pattern. So I think this cold is back on its way in, but we do have warmer, milder air moving northward for the moment on this model. Looks to kind of be coming to an end, though. We even have warmth building along the west coast, so Very interesting. Total precipitation here, because of these two storms that we see move through, we do get a pretty decent amount for a swath here from the deep south central into the mid-Atlantic. Also, the Northwest doing okay, still probably below normal though. And when we look at the anomalies, it's sure enough above average for this swath through here, kind of. This is the most active looking compared to normal. Way below normal for the West, both the North and Southwest, and then also for the Great Lakes and Northeast here, not looking the most active we've ever seen. When we look at the total snowfall on the European model, it's pretty impressive. I would say the most impressive for some of these deeper south central areas, where we get pretty large amounts, Central Plains, and then also here for some of the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley doing quite well. Let's zoom in real quickly, and we do see this model showing, you know, 10, 15 inches throughout some of these areas, even 2 feet for West Virginia. I do think this is a little overblown. Again, my neck of the woods in here, doing okay. Definitely flakes flying. I do want to switch this over real quickly to the positive snow depth change, so we get a little bit more of a realistic perspective. And sure enough, 6 to 10 in here, with maybe a bullseye of 10 to 15 in some of these areas, especially mountainous West Virginia. Wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a bullseye closer to a foot or 15 inches on those mountaintop locations. So think like Snowshoe Resort out there. Very, very high elevation. They tend to do very well. And really exceed surrounding areas oftentimes. So I think that this is a very realistic look we're getting from the European model. Again, total snowfall on the GFS model. We'll switch over to the East Coast view and even the positive snow depth change in a minute, but pretty decent out west considering really all things like the below average precipitation. Really, really decent. Deep south central again doing quite well. And then we get 2 snowstorms kind of moving through a similar area here, bringing large amounts for the Plains, Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic in particular. So let's zoom in here. And sure enough, just like the European model, I mean, you know, we're talking 10, 15, 20 inches in here. I want to move back to where we only have the first storm. Here it is. And let's take a look at the positive snow depth change again. And again, this particular tool takes into account the ground temperature, the rain. It really tries to hone in on the actual accumulation that's taking place. The total snowfall is counting everything as accumulating, so it's just telling you how much snow is falling from the sky. We know that's not a very realistic outcome as far as what we actually see on the ground for many different areas, but again, we kind of end up with 6 to 10 inches throughout a lot of these areas with a bullseye along these taller mountains in West Virginia. This one extends northward through Maryland and southern Pennsylvania, which are quite mountainous, but especially West Virginia here is where we're looking at a foot, 15 inches perhaps, especially. So I think this is another really, really good perspective for us with this initial storm. Once we add all of them together, we get much larger amounts. Again, in the long range, I don't like to use this tool as much, so we just do the total snowfall. And we do see that really the main areas to watch in here are these Ohio Valley, Plains, Midwest, and Mid-Atlantic regions over the next 10, 15 days, it seems like, at least right now. Now, the temperature pattern on our European model, again, cooling. We're already quite cold here on Friday the 3rd. As we move towards Saturday the 4th, it gets a bit colder with mostly widespread greens, which means 10 to 15 degrees below normal. We see by the time we're reaching Sunday the 5th, it's a lot of the same. Monday the 6th, a lot of the same. Notice the below normal temperatures in here. I think this is going to aid in the snowfall. Originally, a couple of days ago, if I was to draw an area where it was warm, it extended all the way up way into northern Virginia. That has kind of cut down here as the low is expected to be further south. We talked about this yesterday, how wherever the low sets up, the above normal and below normal temperature line is going to set up too, and we've seen that kind of occur here. That moves out. We see the cold get actually worse for the 7th with widespread greens, even some of those purplish blues, 15 to 25 degrees below normal. We keep going and we start to see some magentas popping up, which is 25 to 35 degrees below normal. So we get really, really extreme there. Some warm is able to work its way in around the 12th, 13th, 14th here. Hence the 8 to 14 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. But we do kind of regain some of that cold for a while here as we approach the 16th, 17th, 18th. But on this European model, we actually end up with colder conditions out west, perhaps a negative PNA setting up, and then this would give way to perhaps a longer term warm up. Definitely have to see what ends up happening with that. Wintertime thaws are very normal, even in very cold winters, so I wouldn't be the most shocked, but we'll have to wait and see. The GFS model is going to disagree though. Not quite yet though. We see the again warmer temperatures with our upcoming storm underneath the low. Colder temperatures get even worse afterwards here. So we're at the 12th, 13th, 14th. We do get a brief kind of warm up for the Great Lakes and Northeast, but the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic just kind of stays cold even through like the 17th here before we finally get a warm up for the 18th, 19th, but we cool right back down as we're approaching that 19th date. The main difference here is that we still retain those warm temperatures along the west, and this is going to be a huge difference whether we see the warm or like the European model shows the cold at the end. That would be a massive difference in the outcome for the East. We can even see the full effect of those differences on screen here. European model, cold in the West. That warmth spreads really quickly into the East. The GFS model stays cold in the East, and that's mostly due to the warm air staying put over the West. So that is going to make or break the medium to long range here. Speaking of long range, let's briefly go over our long-range model guidance. This is our European extended ensemble model. And what we see from the 3rd through the 10th is colder in the east, warm in the west. No huge surprise there. 10th through the 17th, still cold in the east, but kind of neutral out west. And then the 17th through the 24th, we actually see some signs of cooling out west, but also cold in the east. I think this is when the model kind of loses confidence in much of anything. Again, why I'm kind of surprised about the long-range outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. Maybe it comes from the GFS model. We'll have to see their primary model that they use. So here's the GFS extended ensemble model, and this is the 2nd through the 9th. No surprises. 9th through the 16th looks very similar to the European model, but the 16th through the 23rd here, we retain a lot of those warmer temperatures, just like our normal GFS model. And we see that the cold stays put over the east. So this might be primarily what we're getting our data from for the Climate Prediction Center's outlook for kind of just the ending half of January. Finally, here's the CFS model to kind of break up the disagreement there and see what an outlier model would really show. Here's the 4th through the 11th, very cold. 11th through the 18th looks pretty similar to those previous models. But we get kind of what the European model showed, where it's very, very hard to decipher what this model wants to show. It's cold in the west, cold in the central, cold in the east, and whether it's warm or cold, when it's coast to coast like this, I always say that this is when the model is losing confidence, and we should be losing confidence in it because this usually doesn't happen. Cold or warmth from coast to coast typically is not what actually ends up happening. This is an ensemble model, and what that means, for that matter, all three have been that we just looked at. Over these long-range temperature outlook models, and that means that we have like 20 members at play here, 20 ensemble models, and it takes the mean average of all of those and puts it on screen. But when you have 10 disagreeing with the other 10, you kind of end up with something that's not very likely to happen. None really show what's on screen, but it's the mean average of everything. I hope that makes sense. So really nothing is calling for this. It's just the mean of all of them ends up looking this way. So that's what I think we're coming to the conclusion of here around that 20th, 25th time frame, which means it's exciting. We get to track it. It's very unknown what's going to happen during that time, and I can't wait to figure it out with you guys. So be sure to subscribe. We'll go over this. We'll get to the bottom of it eventually like we always do. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.